Hello viewers, welcome to another session of the Law Basket online lessons with me Alfred Tengbe. In today's session, I shall be focusing on the question of whether the Supreme Executive Authority is connected to the establishment of the office of the First Lady by the President. At first, let's consider Section 61 of the 1991 Constitution of Sierra Leone, Act No. 6, which reads, subject to the provision of this Constitution and of any Act of Parliament, the President may constitute offices for Sierra Leone, make appointments to any such office and terminate any such appointment. Now, looking at this provision of our Constitution, which is the ground in our jurisdiction, I shall discuss on three limbs extracted from said provision, which will serve as the pièce de résistance for today's session. Those limbs are as follows. 1. That the President may constitute offices for Sierra Leone. 2. That he may execute an appointment of those offices. And then 3. The termination of any such appointment. Now let's use the literal way to interpret the three limbs extracted from this provision. And then we'll try to relate it to our topic in question for today's lesson. We are using the literal way because the wordings of Section 61 are explicit. And it is only when the provision is ambiguous that the court will look for a substituted rule for interpretation, such as the golden rule. Let me start with the first thing, which is the President may constitute offices for Sierra Leone. It is very clear under this limb that Section 61 of the 1991 Constitution empowers the sitting President to establish offices for Sierra Leone. It is worth knowing that the word used here is offices, which does not provide for any limits of such establishment. It does as well not make any specific reference to the type of offices the President should establish. Whether limited to ministerial offices or not, there is no specific provisions or specific catch on this provision, in this provision of Section 61. Thus, the President has the mandate to establish any office he deems necessary and can give it any name of his wish as long as it does not violate the laws of Sierra Leone, and then as long as that office is for Sierra Leone. Now the questions here to be asked are as follows. 1. Whether the President expressly in writing established the office of the First Lady. And the answer to this is no. It is by implication through the interpretation of the 1991 Constitution, particularly Section 61, which led to the establishment of the office of the First Lady. Now let's try to draw a line between creating an office and then making an appointment to that office. What Section 61 talks about here is the President's power, whether the past President or present President, their powers to create offices on one hand and then making appointments on the other hand. Take the formal, if legal, as per Section 61. Do we say other offices like that of the Chief Minister's office, Human Capital Development, etc. were constituted by the President on the same constitutional authority? Do we say so? If the answer is in the affirmative, can he create an office and name it the office of the First Lady as he does for other offices he has created or constituted? Can we say so? Now, another question here is whether the office of the First Lady was established by the President and whether he had such mandate to do so. And the answer to that is yes. Here is not about who occupies the office, which will be the next limb for today's session. This limb that I'm on now focuses on whether the President has the mandate to establish any office for Sierra Leone. And the answer to this question is yes. He has such rights according to Section 61 of our Constitution. Can the office of the First Lady exist even without the President making an appointment to it or declaring its existence? This is another question. The answer to this is no. The reason being is it's an office which its existence remains discretionary to the President. Let's take for instance Patricia Kaba, a former First Lady of ex-President Kaba, who tried to establish such office unsuccessfully due to the discretion of his husband. It was only successfully established under the ex-President Nkrumah's regime when he accepted Nkrumah to serve in that capacity. One may hence want to ask whether the office of the First Lady is for Sierra Leone. It's also a question one may want to ask. And the answer to it is, as long as the existence of such office is recognized by our laws, then such office is for Sierra Leone. Thus, the office of the First Lady is established by the President and it's constitutional. It's hence for Sierra Leone according to Section 61 of the 1991 Constitution of Sierra Leone, Act number 6. Now moving to the second limb for today's session, which is extracted from the provision of Section 61 of our Constitution, which is the appointment of those offices. The question to ask is, who conducts an appointment to the offices established by the President, and then who is to be appointed? The answer here is Section 61 of the 1991 Constitution makes provision for the President to make an appointment to those offices of his establishment, and then if that is so, he has also as well the mandate to execute appointment to those offices. So it remains discretional to the sitting President of Sierra Leone. That is to say, he can appoint anybody of his choice as long as the person is of sound mind and capable of manning such office of his establishment. Then if we take a look at Section 53, subsection 2 of the 1991 Constitution of Sierra Leone, which makes provision for the President to act on the advice of the Cabinet, with the exception of cases where the law will require him to act subject to the approval of Parliament other than that of Cabinet. And now, the question with regards to Section 61 of our Constitution is that, did it make provision that the appointments of those offices by the President should be subject to parliamentary approval? The answer here is no. And even if the answer was yes, the President may as well act without relying on any advice or without relying on the advice of any authority. And the question of whether he has in any case received or acted in accordance with such advice shall not be inquired into by any court according to Section 53, subsection 3 of the 1991 Constitution of Sierra Leone. One may also assert that the appointment of the First Lady and then the naming of that office as the office of the First Lady is based on paragraph 2 of Section 53, subsection 2 of the 1991 Constitution, which says, and I quote, provided that the President shall always act in accordance with his deliberate judgment in signifying his approval for the purpose of an appointment to an office of his personal staff. This can also be used as a ground that one can bring up as an argument that it is this provision that the President relied on to appoint the First Lady and then name that office as the office of the First Lady. Now, the last thing for today's session is the termination of such appointment. The President has the right to terminate his appointee's appointment to any office of his establishment, according to Section 61 of the 1991 Constitution of Sierra Leone. This thing is also based on presidential discretion. How he can use the discretion to terminate any of his appointments to any of his established offices. Now, relating this limb to the office of the First Lady, the President may use his discretion to close such office or rename it and execute the termination of the appointment of the First Lady to that office. Hence, this remains discretional. However, if the title remains the office of the First Lady, then there will be an automatic termination of the appointment of the First Lady, where there is executed by a competent court a divorce between the President and the First Lady, until there is another legitimate wife of the President to resume such office. And it is worth also knowing that all this remain discretional to the President himself. So, with regards to the topic in question for today's session, one can conclude that the Supreme Executive Authority is connected to the establishment of the office of the First Lady by the President, and then it is constitutional. It is constitutional because it is provided for by Section 61 of our 1991 Constitution. Thanks for viewing, and make sure you subscribe to our channel. Also like, share, and then click on the notification key to keep you notified on our next upload. Thank you. The Law Baskets.